All right, in this video, we are talking about our first responders or first person on scene. Could be an officer, could be any number of different roles. Think about jails, prisons, the guards could be the first person at a crime scene. Probation and parole agents could be the first person at a crime scene if they're going to do a home visit. There's all manner of folks who are our first responders. And essentially, you got to think about this. The first person on scene, they are going to make or break the case based on what they do or don't do. If they don't protect the evidence, we could have all kinds of contamination issues and lose the ability to present that evidence in court. We also have to have an assumption then that there is evidence on scene. And this goes back to the idea of what you know as Locard's exchange principle. And Locard's exchange principle simply states that anytime you have interaction of any kind, you will have some sort of an exchange. So the mere fact that, you know, I am touching this pen, I am leaving fingerprints behind on this pen, and potentially maybe there is like some dust or hair on this pen that now has static clung to me and made me in association with this scene. So think about, you know, you go and shake somebody's hand, you know, some skin cells transfer between the two of you. Maybe a dog hair or something static clings to one person and then jumps over to the other person. All kinds of interactions happen all the time. Just the fact that you walk into a room, you are going to leave shoe prints behind on the surface, and anything that is on the ground or on the floor will potentially cling to your shoe. So, you know, you've deposited some of you into that room, and some of that room has picked up and come to you. Also keep in mind, you know, something that we always talk about in public service is the idea of Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. You know, your batteries are going to die in your flashlight. You are going to run out of memory card on your camera. So, you know, have plans, be ready for things, you know, have spare batteries, have spare memory cards, all those kinds of things, because, you know, as the first person at a scene, it is the things you fail to do that are going to screw up an investigation. Now, number one priority at our scene is going to be officer safety. If you get hurt, if you get incapacitated, that makes the situation worse for everybody else. Not only do I now have to investigate the crime scene, but I have to investigate what happened to you. And that gives me double the work. And you don't want to give your partners and your friends double the work. The other concept here is, you know, we talk about blue and brown canaries. That's what firefighters and EMTs call the cops. The idea goes back to a little bit of history where before we had gas detection devices, miners used to bring canaries down into the mine, and when the canaries fell off their perch, that meant that there was too much CO2 in the mine, and that was a sign for them to leave before they would go down. So basically, you know, firefighters, when they show up on scene, they look to see are cops standing up or laying down. If the cop is standing up, it's safe for the EMTs to come in and treat the patients. If the cop is laying down, they park back a couple of blocks and wait for more cops to show up. I don't want any of you to be blue or brown canaries. The blue or brown comes from the uniforms cops and sheriff's deputies typically wear. So if you're the first person on a scene, start making notes. You know, what were you called to originally? When did you arrive? When do other officers arrive? At what point did you recognize you needed additional resources and request those? At what time are you done with the call? These things set up your chain of custody of evidence and establish whether or not you will be able to say that there was or was not the potential for contamination in evidence. You're kind of lucky these days. A lot of this stuff is automatically done for you by our computer-aided dispatching system. So as you're on the radio announcing certain things, dispatchers are making entries into the computer, but don't always think that that's going to work for you. Early in your scene, while you're there, make notes about stuff that you are noticing. What are your door positions? Did you have to open the door to go in, or was the door sitting open for you when you arrived on scene? Is the door locked? Did the homeowner, were they inside the home when they called 911, and are they still outside or inside when you arrive on scene and begin your assessment of the scene? Are the lights on or off? Are the window shades pulled or are they open? You know, what kinds of activity do we have? Do we have newspapers sitting out? Is the mailbox looking like it's full? What do you smell? Do you smell dead body smell? Do you smell, rotting food? What kind of indicators do we have sitting around? Do you have mail on the counter? What is the postmark? Is there a newspaper sitting there that is unopened? Do you have a table set for dinner and it's morning time? Anything else that you can note that you would want to be, keeping track of these things that are very easy to forget about, very easy to overlook, even when we talk about death investigation. What do we have? A thermostat on the wall. And is a thermostat a programmable thermostat? What is the current temperature? Is it going to be changing in a little bit? You know, later on when you come back, is it going to be the same temperature? We want to start protecting the scene. So do what you can to protect the scene. You use the crime scene tape. You know, use different kinds of roping. Park squad cars and fire trucks in a way to block traffic. Close the door. Stand outside and say, hey, everybody stay back. Whatever the case may be, you want to protect the scene. You want to keep people out. Again, we're worrying about contamination. We're not at the point where we're collecting evidence yet. We're in that first responder mindset. We're waiting till we have all of our resources in place, and then we'll begin collecting evidence. So perimeters usually come in a multi-layer area. So we have our crime scene here, and the only people inside the crime scene or allowed inside the crime scene are going to be the folks actively collecting evidence. Then we set up you know, an inner perimeter, and we set up an outer perimeter. The idea here is between our perimeters, we can have a staging area. So this way, when we talk about the fact that only the CSIs are in here, and we give, you know, a nice big buffer area so that people are staying back, and just in case we realize the crime scene was a little bigger, we still have evidence protected. And so then out here is where we have, you know, our spare evidence bags, where we have our camera batteries, where we have everything that we don't need the second we're in here, but we will need to be going back and forth. This also gives us a place to have a break, to take a drink of water, to eat a candy bar, whatever the case may be that you need to keep your energy level up while you're working the crime scene. Also, supervisors and bosses like to show up on scene, and so if you have a staging area, this is where the boss can be, and so now the boss isn't inside the crime scene contaminating our evidence. The boss is back here. And then, you know, outside civilians, the news media, all that stuff is out here. Sometimes we can even have another layer of containment for big scenes, you know, where you end up when you're dealing with like a SWAT team or something like that. We might even have an outer perimeter to keep people back just that much further. The idea here, though, is we want to keep people out. We want to keep the DNA and the fingerprints and all the stuff that's easily contaminated away from contamination. Now, what do you do when you have an injured person at your crime scene? If you're the first responder, your life is your top priority. Other people's lives is also a top priority. So if you have to save a life, and in saving a life, doing CPR, doing first aid, you damage or destroy evidence, too bad. That's a mechanical loss, and that is defendable in court. No lawyer is ever going to accuse you of doing anything wrong because you saved a life, because now their client is, you know, not facing murder charges. Their client is facing an assault or a battery charge or some other charge. If possible, let's move the victim out of the crime scene, keep our contamination to a minimum. If that's not possible, make sure you talk to EMS and have them approach the victim in such a way as to not disturb or destroy evidence. Point out evidence to the EMTs and paramedics so that they don't move stuff if possible. Sometimes it's got to be done. And make sure that if we've got somebody injured, that we're trying to get an officer to ride along in the ambulance or meet the ambulance at the ER and collect any belongings, collect any physical evidence off of a person. Also, we want to be able to get any statements from them, get them talking if possible. And especially as we deal with different medications that might be administered to them, it'd be nice if we can talk to them before certain medications go into their system, and we have to question whether or not is that really what they were meaning to say or not. If we have a dead person at the scene, first thing to do is, you know, save a life. So make sure that they're dead, make sure they're beyond saving, and then we get on the phone if possible and make notifications. Now, when I say make notifications, we are not talking about notifying the family of the deceased. We're talking about notifying your chain of command, letting dispatch know. You know, police radios are great, but unfortunately, we can have people listening in on the police scanner. And I've been at scenes where we talked about somebody being dead on scene over the radio, and we have families of the decedent showing up at the scene. So you don't want that. You want to be on the phone talking about death if possible. Coroners, medical examiners, that depends on if you're in a state that does coroners or a state that does medical examiners. Here in Wisconsin, we are still under the coroner system, but we do have medical examiners who do the autopsy. The coroner is the person who comes out to the crime scene and collects the dead body, puts it in the body bag and transports it away. Policies always change on these things. Do you want the coroner on scene right away, or do you want the coroner on scene later on? Just depends. You know, around here, we typically have the coroner on scene almost immediately, and the coroner might remain on scene, or the coroner might leave for a while and then come back when we're ready to release the body to him or her. A couple of things to think about. You know, if you have hangings, we want to be careful about the knots. And when we deal with firearms, we basically don't want to touch them until it's time to put them in the box. There's no need to unload firearms the second you arrive on scene. You know, officer safety is a big concern, but if it's just 3 cops at a scene, why does that gun need to be unloaded right now? Let's wait until it's time to collect the firearm, and then we'll worry about unloading it. We'll talk about those later in the semester. If there's a suspect there, get them out of the scene as quickly as possible. Their defense attorney will say, of course you found my client's fingerprints and DNA at the scene. You were, you know, sitting with him in the scene, allowing him to breathe and sneeze and cough and touch things. So get them out of the scene and try and keep that scene safe. Now we get into a point where we're, you know, basically waiting for our resources. Start our log of who's coming in and out of our crime scenes. Who could be some witnesses in the area. Try and figure out some facts. Again, we're not quite at that point yet where we are collecting evidence. We're getting our resources together. So our crime scene logs, this is an official looking log. There's lots of them out there. Some agencies, you know, have a form that they use. Some agencies don't. Sometimes you just use a page in your notebook. But we want to list off everybody who's coming into our crime scene. Who are they? What agency do they work for? So, you know, are they an EMT, a firefighter, a police officer, a state trooper? What time are they coming in? What time are they leaving our crime scene? And why are they here? Collecting evidence, supervising other people, providing medical aid to the victim. If you don't have reason to be here, you don't come into my crime scene. You can be on scene, but you're outside the yellow tape. If you don't have a reason to be here, you don't come into my scene. And this keeps a lot of our looky-loos and a lot of the folks who will otherwise destroy our evidence out. And basically now just some reminders. When you're in a crime scene, you can't eat. You shouldn't be smoking. Shouldn't be drinking water. If you have to use the restroom, you don't go into the victim's bathroom and use their restroom. Don't use their towels. You know, unless it's your job to talk to the press, don't be talking to the press. Don't have your friends come into the scene. You know, you might be an officer or a CSI working for an agency, and you're on scene and you got a buddy who works, you know, in a different district in a different part of town, and you get on the phone and you say, you got to come over and see this scene. This is amazing. Don't be having your friends come into the scene, even if they are police officers and firefighters, even if they are official. We don't want the field trips. And, you know, I like to keep the amount of information that's going over the radio to a minimum, because, again, we have folks out there listening to their police scanners. They're going to find out a lot of information. And at this point, we are not at the point where we have information going out to the public. Alrighty, so that's our first responder duties, and the second part of this discussion will be covering ethics. So part 2 of the video for this week will be ethics.